Okay, colleagues, so today I want to talk about online resources for studying and researching topics in philosophy. Now, the immediate reason for making this video is because, in general, on this channel, with the kinds of videos I make, I intend to use a fairly broad brush, so to speak. Therefore, my approach tends to be somewhat unsystematic and maybe somewhat vague or imprecise. And as an antidote to that, I wanted to give students and viewers in general some sort of a reference as to where they can get a more nuanced approach, right? So, in some sense, this video is intended to be a general kind of background reference for everything I say in my videos, on the one hand, and on the other hand, as a kind of survival rescue kit for people who are struggling with philosophical topics. Now, I think far and away the best general purpose philosophical resource that's available is the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So, my first introductory, so to speak, programmatic video was about naturalism or physicalism, and Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy naturally has many different articles on the topic. Just to name a few, so here's one on naturalism. Here's another one on physicalism. And if you scroll to the bottom, it will give you a list of resources, but also resources on the web, things that you can look up, that kind of thing. So in general, I want to say Stanford Encyclopedia is an excellent resource. It may be a little difficult for first-year students, so it's kind of a careful recommendation for first-year students. But for anybody who is willing to go, over and beyond the basic level, so like advanced students, so this is an absolute must, I would say. Now, also general word of caution: you probably, like, if you're writing a coursework or a dissertation, well, first of all, probably should not be watching random videos on YouTube. But even if you are, it's best not to actually refer to Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy per se. Or if you're writing a University of London exam, it's not a good idea to refer to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy itself, but rather to look at the things Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy refers to look at its bibliography, and then use that for your general references. So again, let me just summarize by saying that I think Stanford Encyclopedia is excellent for everyone, but you should not expect an easy read. Now, another resource that's available is the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. And, for example, it also has an article on naturalism and a wide range of other issues, obviously. And just as with the Stanford Encyclopedia, it will give you a list of references for further reading and, of course, list bibliographical information, that kind of thing. And so, in general, I would say Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, I kind of feel, this is very subjective, but I feel that it tends to be somewhat less comprehensive than Stanford Encyclopedia. Although I must admit that some articles are outstanding, and some articles, on some topics are only covered on the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. In general, I think it tends to be somewhat easier to read and could provide an alternative viewpoint to the one that's presented on the Stanford Encyclopedia. So it's like the general verdict is that I generally prefer Stanford, but it's a good idea to take a look at the Internet Encyclopedia if you have the time. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a negative reference, so you should, in general, I would say never use it if you can help it, right? So I think, obviously, on Wikipedia articles, the quality of articles varies wildly. And some articles are good, some articles are horrifying. And in general, people should use it with extreme care. And I have seen horrendous errors on Wikipedia in general. And if you are looking for some very basic introductory source, like if you need a 5-second reference, yeah, maybe, why not? But in general, use with extreme care. And if there's some crucial or important information or controversial claims, it's always the best idea to double check them in more authoritative sources. And of course, just as a reminder, if you're writing an essay or a coursework, you should never ever quote or include Wikipedia in bibliography. This is, I think, extremely bad style. So if you are building your bibliography, or in general your reading list, if you have some kind of an authoritative textbook that you are looking at, just taking a note from there is a good idea. and following the bibliography from the textbook that you're reading, or following the bibliography from Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, or Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. That's a good form. Good advice, I should say. But in general, if you're just using some kind of a random search, or if you're just sifting through information, in general, it is a good idea to look at the publisher. So among the best publishing houses for philosophy, I would say Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, Routledge, Hackett. There's loads of others, but these are the ones that come to mind. And in general, of course, you should aim for your source to be sort of, in some sense, the newer the better. Usually, newer editions include overviews of sources or materials which existed in the past. It's not a 100% rule, but in general, newer sources tend to be better or more comprehensive in this sense. And I mean, in some sense, discussing publications, like book-length publications, could be an own separate video. But this is, I think, just some kind of general reference to get you started. So now, actually, let me shift gears a little bit and talk about other internet resources that you may find useful. So one thing I immediately have in mind are video lectures. And these come, I think, in two formats, paid and free. So let's start with the free ones. It's a whole bunch of excellent materials available on the internet. Probably one of the best ones would be Open Yale courses. So one course I immediately want to mention is the Introduction to Political Philosophy by Stephen Smith. There are, I think, some issues with it, in the sense that I don't necessarily agree with everything that Stephen Smith, professor, says. But in general, it's very good, I think. And all sorts of things are available. So you have video, you have audio, you have transcripts. So it's easy to use, easy to cite. And as a matter of fact, Stephen Smith has a book published after this video lecture series. So if you need to use this as a reference. But at the same time, I do kind of urge you to take what Stephen Smith says with a grain of salt, because his point of view tends to be idiosyncratic at times. So even though I probably should not devote a lot of time to this, but also Open Yale courses has a wide variety of series devoted to other more peripheral topics. Like, for example, this course on global problems of population growth by Robert Wyman is an absolute favorite of mine. Another one would be Introduction to Psychology by Paul Bloom. Or this one, maybe quite unexpectedly, Frontiers and Controversies in Astrophysics, which is specifically aimed at quote-unquote non-science majors, so accessible, hopefully, to most people. So I think it is an excellent idea, for us, everyone who has the interest and the time and the capacity to be at least aware that these resources exist. I think, it's a lot of fun and also useful for, broadening our outlook. Now, continuing on, University of California, Berkeley also had a huge archive, which they have taken down, and it's kind of partially available, but you need to search the web a little bit. But one course from the University of California, Berkeley, which is kind of more readily available, is the course on social theory by Michael Burawoy, and who used to be the president of American and World Sociological Association, so he's a pretty important sociologist in his own right. And as you can see, the course is fairly long, so it's more than 50 lectures actually from Adam Smith through Marx and Engels, Lenin, Gramsci, Fanon, and then Durkheim, Foucault, Weber, Simone de Beauvoir, and several feminist writers as well. I think an excellent course, very interesting and of high, outstanding quality presentation. Okay, so the next one, kind of with no particular transition, is the BBC Radio 4 program In Our Time. Also tends to have very good material in terms of philosophy, like the presentation on Kant or Wittgenstein or Gödel's incompleteness theorem, that kind of thing. And so, sort of in this haphazard style, let me just continue on. History of Philosophy Without Any Gaps, by Peter Adamson, is also, I think, a colossal undertaking in all sorts of ways. So if you look at the list of all episodes, like, it covers everything from classical antiquity, late antiquity, Islamic world, medieval philosophy, Byzantine philosophy, and now he's currently covering Renaissance philosophy. So he has just covered, as of today, he has recently covered Machiavelli, and I can't wait for him to move on to topics in modern philosophy. I would be ecstatic to hear his presentation of Thomas Hobbes, for example. But also he talks about philosophy in India and what he calls Africana philosophy, which is philosophy in Africa and African diaspora. So while we're talking about all this, probably I should also at least mention Coursera, and a couple courses I could point to immediately is by Susan Sauvé-Meyer, about ancient philosophy, about Plato and Aristotle. I think both courses are excellent. So I don't imagine that this is any kind of exhaustive list, but these are just some pointers, some general, general direction. If you're looking for something to listen to over the weekend or summer holiday or something like that. And so the last category I want to cover, although there's going to be a footnote at the end, the last category I want to cover is actually this website, The Great Courses. Now, courses here are available for pay, so these are not free. But as far as I can tell, you can get a university library access to these courses as well. So let me just name a few. So one, I think, excellent resource are the two courses by this professor Lawrence Cahoon. So one of them is called Modern Intellectual Tradition from Descartes to Derrida, and the other one is called Modern Political Tradition from Hobbes to Habermas. So they tend to be fairly superficial, fairly introductory, but I think very good value per minute of time. Like, it's excellent use of your time. Not a single word wasted. Although it's, again, basic and introductory, but very good in general. So the next thing I want to talk about, again, The Great Courses has a huge selection of different resources. So another one is Professor Jason Satterfield, who has two courses. Well, he has many, but two I want to mention. One is called Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, and the other one, which is called Mind-Body Medicine, the New Science of Optimal Health. I think both of them are very interesting in terms of our contemporary psychological, neurological, physiological approaches to the way our body works. I don't have this open immediately, but also you can look at Professor Robert Sapolsky. Some of his lectures are also available on YouTube through the Stanford University website. So for some reason, it doesn't want to load this. So anyway, yeah, biology and human behavior. This is the one I'm looking for. So this is the paid version, but he has sort of an analogous free version available through the Stanford channel on YouTube. Okay, so the next thing I guess I want to talk about is Well, okay, so Professor David Ruchnik has two courses on Greek philosophy. One is General Introduction. The other one is fails to load here, but is on Plato's Republic. Both of them I think are very good as well. Okay, so here's the one on Plato's Republic. And kind of also to sort of veer off in some random direction, I think Professor Sean Carroll is one of the foremost, in my humble opinion, is one of the foremost intellectuals of our time, period. And I'm a huge fan of everything he does. He has several courses here on the Great Courses Plus, one about the Higgs boson, the other one on the physics of time, and the other one is on the dark matter and dark energy, which is I think a general introduction to cosmology. Also, I think very, very interesting, especially if we want to understand when we say this word physicalism, what does the present, scientific picture of reality actually look like? And Sean Carroll is a practicing physicist. He's has tenure at the University of Caltech, California Institute of Technology, where he actually occupies the former desk of Richard Feynman, if that name means anything to you. Well, like if you haven't heard of Sean Carroll and if you're generally interested in this kind of thing, I think you should definitely check him out. Now, in addition to all this stuff, Sean Carroll also has an excellent YouTube channel. So he has a couple playlists. One of them, The Biggest Ideas in the Universe, which is sort of his slightly technical but excellent, outstanding introduction to our contemporary physics. And also he has this Mindscape podcast, which deals with issues in physics, but not only in physics. It talks about all sorts of things such as psychology, sociology, theory of democracy, how does consciousness emerge, what is free will, what is the meaning of life. In general, also I think an excellent resource in general. And I mean, my use of the word naturalism to a very large extent is tied to, I think, or at least the way I understand it, Sean Carroll's understanding of this word. And last thing I want to mention is that also if you just search YouTube, you can find these interviews with Brian McGee. They've been done, I think, in the late 70s or maybe early 80s on the British television, but also of outstanding quality. And these would be dialogues with leading professors in the field, which offer, on the one hand, again, basic, but also, I think, quite accessible introduction to most, not all, but most foundational philosophers in the Western tradition and foundational topics in the Western tradition. Okay, so anyway, I could go on talking about this for a very long time, but again, the general purpose of the video, to remind myself and you, was to provide some kind of a safety net. So if I say things which are not particularly nuanced, you have something to fall back on. And I think in this respect, this covers at least the most basic, the most obvious resources, or the least controversial resources I could recommend. So let me wrap up here. I hope this was useful. I hope you will find these resources useful and actually fun. And I suppose that's it for today. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll see you around.